The town of Whistlewood wasn't known for much. A dry patch of sunburned land with crooked fences, crooked laws, and even crookeder men. The main street ran like a spine through its middle. Saloon, stable, post office, church. That's all you needed in those days. That and silence. And on a Tuesday near sundown, silence came riding through town on a tired black gelding, covered in prairie dust and years of stories no one wanted to hear. The rider wore a tan duster, frayed at the hem, and a hat pulled low like it didn't want to be recognized. But the horse knew the way, and even if the man hadn't said a word, his name rode ahead of him like thunder. Charlie Bell, the coward. 15 years had passed since he'd left Whistlewood, not riding, but running. That's how they remembered it, at least. Running after refusing a duel with a man whose name no one dared whisper anymore. But the man had died, and Charlie hadn't. That made things complicated. Sheriff Ed Morgan stood by the rail post outside his office, arms crossed, lips tight around a half-chewed toothpick. The moment he saw Charlie, his shoulders tensed, like a man watching a storm roll in with no place to hide. Inside the saloon, the piano stopped. A bottle clinked too hard against a counter. Someone muttered, "Ain't no ghost. That's really him." Charlie didn't look left or right. He just dismounted, tied his horse to the post like any traveler would, and stepped onto the boardwalk. His boots sounded heavier than they should have, not from the dust, but from memory. He walked straight to the sheriff. "Evenin', Ed," Charlie said, voice low, dry like the wind. "Didn't think you'd ever show your face here again," the sheriff answered, eyes not leaving him. Charlie gave a slight nod. "Didn't come to start anything, just passing through." Sheriff Morgan looked him up and down. The man had aged, sure, leaner, grayer, quieter. But there was something else, something harder in the eyes. "You got business?" Charlie glanced down the street. "Might rest a few days, then move on." The sheriff spat out the toothpick. "This town don't forget easy, Charlie." "I know," he said, "but that doesn't mean it remembers, right?" That night, Charlie took a room above the saloon. No one greeted him. No one smiled. But no one stopped him either. He took his key, lit the lamp, and set his satchel on the table. Inside were only two things, a folded shirt and a worn leather notebook with initials burned into the cover. Not his own. Outside, the piano started again, shaky and forced, like someone trying to pretend nothing was wrong. Downstairs, whispers had already started circling like vultures. "You think he's here for revenge? After 15 years? Maybe he finally grew a spine. Or maybe they were scared. Scared he'd tell the truth." The next morning, Charlie walked to the cemetery. It wasn't large. 30 graves, maybe. Some marked with stones, some just wooden crosses bleached by sun and time. He stopped at the far end, where the fence was broken and weeds grew unchecked. He crouched by a marker so faded it barely held a name anymore. James Avery, that was the name. Not Charlie Bell. Not the man who'd challenged him. Just a boy. A farmhand. 19. And buried beneath the dirt, because Charlie hadn't told the truth. He stayed there a while, hat in hand, eyes on the wood like it might speak. Then he said quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't speak. I thought I was protecting someone." By midday, Sheriff Morgan found him sitting on the bench outside the post office. Folks are talking. Charlie didn't look up. They always did. You can't expect to walk back in like nothing happened. They remember what you did. Charlie turned to face him now, eyes tired. "No, Ed. They remember what they think I did." The sheriff leaned against the post beside him. "So, you finally gonna tell us?" Charlie paused. Then, "Not yet. You still protecting her? Charlie didn't answer. He didn't need to. That evening, a boy about 12 came to the saloon with a note. Charlie opened it at the bar. Simple handwriting. Meet me at the old well. Midnight. R. He folded it once, pocketed it, and nodded to the bartender. Tea, if you have it. The bartender raised an eyebrow. Don't serve that much. Charlie smiled faintly. Didn't figure. At midnight, under a sky so clear it could cut glass, Charlie waited by the old well just outside town. The woman arrived on foot, wrapped in a shawl, face hidden. Ruthie, Charlie said without turning. She stepped beside him. Didn't think you'd really come back. I said I would. You also said you wouldn't talk. Charlie looked at her. I didn't. She sighed, shifting the shawl. So why are you here? Charlie hesitated. Because I'm tired of letting everyone else carry the lie. You think the truth makes it better? I think it sets it down. She was quiet a long while. Then, if people find out, they won't need to, he interrupted. Not if he does. Tommy? Charlie nodded. He's asking questions. He's just a kid? Charlie's voice softened. So was James. Ruthie looked at the stars like they might offer a way out. Charlie spoke gently. I'm not here to punish anyone, but maybe it's time the past stopped punishing me. Back at the saloon, the boy, Tommy Ash, sat near the corner, sketching something on paper. He watched Charlie walk in. The old man approached slowly. You draw? Tommy nodded. Just horses, mostly. Charlie nodded toward the sketch. Your dad was good with horses. Tommy looked up. You knew him. Charlie smiled faintly. Better than most. Tommy looked at him, squinting. You're the guy who ran away, right? Charlie paused, then sat beside him. I didn't run, kid. I walked away because no one wanted the truth. Is that why they hated you? Charlie looked down at the drawing. No. They hated me because I didn't fight when they thought I should. Tommy frowned. Why didn't you? Charlie leaned back, exhaled. Because if I had, your father would have died that day. Tommy blinked. But he did die. Charlie nodded. Later. Somewhere else. But not here. Not in front of you. Tommy said nothing. Charlie stood. I'll tell you about him. When you're ready. That night, the town of Whistlewood was quiet again. But the silence wasn't heavy this time. It was waiting. Waiting for something it hadn't heard in a long time. The truth. 15 years ago, the dust in Whistlewood wouldn't settle. It was the kind of summer where everything cracked. The ground, the crops, the people. Fights came easier than water, and the man who brought the fire was named Reed Ash. He wasn't a cowboy. He wasn't an outlaw. He was something worse. A man the town feared but needed. He ran cattle, lent money, owned half the properties between the saloon and the stables. His men ran wild. His rules stood taller than the sheriff's, and no one challenged him. Until Charlie Bell. Charlie had been young then, just 24, quick with a rope, quicker with a word, and not interested in being owned by anyone. He broke horses, delivered mail, and played poker like he didn't care if he won, which made people trust him. He didn't drink, didn't lie, didn't ask for more than he earned. But he had a sharp tongue, and one day it slipped. It happened during a Sunday service, the only time everyone in Whistlewood was quiet in the same room. Reed Ash had walked in late, boots loud, smirk louder. He'd leaned on the back pew, arms crossed, like he owned the church too. Charlie, sitting front row, didn't stand or bow his head. He just turned around and said, plain as a desert sunrise, "You're welcome to pray, Mr. Ash, but I reckon God ain't your kind of banker." Gasps. Silence. Then Reed laughed. Short, dry, and dangerous. He didn't say a word, just walked out. But 2 days later, a body showed up behind the general store. James Avery, farm boy, 19. Wrong place, wrong time. A knife in the chest. No witnesses. No reason. Unless you believed the whisper that Charlie Bell had argued with James the night before. About cards, or money, or a girl. Depending who told the story. Reed Ash told his version to Sheriff Morgan that same afternoon. Said he'd seen the two men fighting. Said Charlie stormed off, white with rage. Said he hoped it wasn't Charlie, but the timing fit. By sundown, the town had made up its mind. Charlie never denied knowing James, never denied the argument, but he swore, on his mother's grave and the cross around his neck, that he hadn't touched the boy. It didn't matter. The town was boiling for justice. Sheriff Morgan, still green in the job, called a hearing in the saloon. No judge, no court, just questions and fear. That night, 3 people stood between Charlie and the noose. The bartender, who said Charlie had been with him drinking, until someone reminded him Charlie didn't drink. The stable hand, who said he saw someone else near the store, but couldn't name who. And Ruthie Gale, who hadn't said anything at all, until the last moment. And that changed everything. She stood, quiet, pale, trembling like a leaf in a storm. "I saw Charlie follow James out," she said, "and I heard yelling. Then nothing." "Did you see a weapon?" the sheriff asked. She didn't answer. "Did you see the strike?" She looked away. Reed Ash stood behind her, hands on the chair, eyes fixed on Charlie. And Charlie, young, scared, confused, looked at Ruthie and understood. She was afraid. Not of him. Of Reed, and if he said anything now, it wouldn't help her. So he stood there and said nothing, and they called him guilty in everything but name. But just as they prepared the rope, something changed. Reed Ash stepped forward, smiled, and said, "Let's not spill blood over a bad night. Let the boy live. If he leaves town by morning, we'll call it square." The crowd grumbled, but nodded. Charlie was spared the noose, but not the name. The next day, he packed, and walked out of Whistlewood with every eye on him, every voice calling him coward. He didn't argue, because he thought silence could protect Ruthie, because he thought leaving was enough. But a week later, Reed Ash vanished. Said he rode east for a business deal. Never returned. Some whispered Charlie had followed and killed him. Others said Reed was never real to begin with. Just a shadow that ruled the town too long. But the truth was, he left behind a son. Back in the present, Charlie stood outside the church, looking up at the faded steeple. The bell hadn't rung in years. Tommy Ash approached him, boots crunching gravel. "You said you knew my dad." Charlie turned, quiet. "I did." Tommy looked uncertain. "Was he really as bad as folks say?" Charlie paused. He was powerful, feared. People did what he told them. "But you didn't." Charlie smiled slightly. "No, I didn't." Tommy hesitated. "Did you kill him?" Charlie's smile faded. "No." "Then who did?" Charlie looked out toward the hills. "Time. Guilt. Maybe both." Tommy frowned. "You don't talk like anyone here." "I stopped talking like them a long time ago." Later that day, Charlie sat in the same saloon where he was nearly hanged. Ruthie entered quietly, older now, dressed plain. She sat across from him. "You shouldn't have protected me back then," she said. Charlie sipped his coffee. "Didn't do it for you." "Then why?" "Because I didn't want to give him what he wanted." She looked away. "I thought you hated me." "I never hated you," Charlie said. "But I hated what silence did to both of us." She nodded slowly. "Tommy's asking questions." "I know." "Are you going to tell him?" "Not unless he's ready." And if he is? Charlie met her eyes. Then I'll tell him the part that's mine. You'll have to tell him the rest. That night, Tommy sat outside the sheriff's office, staring at the stars. Sheriff Morgan came out, lit a cigar, and sat beside him. Hard to sleep? Tommy nodded. Yeah. The sheriff blew out smoke. You know, I used to think the worst kind of man was one who ran from a fight. Tommy looked over. But now I'm not so sure, the sheriff continued. Sometimes, running is the only thing a man can do when the whole town's pointed the wrong way. Did you think Charlie was guilty? The sheriff sighed. I thought he was guilty of being in the way. That's all. And I was too green to stand up for what I knew. Tommy was quiet a moment. Then, was my dad dangerous? Sheriff Morgan stared at the smoke rising. He was the kind of man you obey, or regret it. Your father ruled fear. Charlie, he didn't, and people hated him for it. Tommy swallowed. Why'd he come back? The sheriff tapped the ash off his cigar. Maybe because you're here now, and maybe he don't want you growing up with the same lies he had to carry. Later that week, the town gathered for Sunday service for the first time in 5 years. Charlie didn't sit in the front row. He stood at the back, hat in hand, silent. Ruthie stood beside him. So did Tommy, and when the preacher asked if anyone wanted to speak, no one moved, but a quiet truth was already walking the town again. And this time, no one dared to call it cowardice. The days after the service passed quiet, not because there was peace, but because the town of Whistlewood didn't know what to do with the truth once it started breathing again. Charlie Bell walked the streets like a ghost. People were afraid to look in the eyes, not because they hated him now, but because deep down, some of them remembered. Not what he did, but what they didn't do. The silence of a town can be louder than any shot fired. And Whistlewood was screaming. Sheriff Morgan stood in his office, staring at an old tin badge on the wall. The edges had dulled, the shine long gone. He hadn't worn it in weeks, maybe longer. Charlie stepped in, uninvited, but the sheriff didn't flinch. You knew, Charlie said. The sheriff didn't answer right away. I knew enough. You let it happen. I let the town decide. That was the way back then. Charlie stepped closer. You were the law. Sheriff Morgan turned, tired. You think it was easy, Charlie? You were the only one who didn't flinch. The rest of us, we were already too deep in fear to stand. Charlie leaned on the desk. I stayed quiet to protect Ruthie. But you stayed quiet to protect yourself. Sheriff Morgan didn't deny it. I wanted to believe the lie, the sheriff admitted, because the truth meant going up against Reed Ash, and no one survived that. Charlie's jaw tightened. Well, I did, and all it cost me was 15 years of exile and a name soaked in shame. Morgan's eyes lowered. I can't take it back. No, Charlie said, but you can stop pretending you weren't part of it. Across town, in the back room of the saloon, Ruthie sat with Tommy. She held a folded letter in her lap, written 15 years ago, never sent. He wrote this to you, she said softly, handing it to the boy. Tommy opened it slowly. Inside was a single paragraph, penned in a hard, nervous hand. Tommy, I'm not leaving because I'm guilty. I'm leaving because if I stay, someone you love gets hurt. When you grow up, if you still want to know why, find Charlie Bell. He'll tell you the part I can't say. Your father Tommy read it twice. His voice shook. You knew all this time? Ruthie nodded. Not all of it, but enough. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought keeping quiet would keep you safe. Tommy stood. Safe from what? From knowing the truth? No, she whispered. From becoming him. That evening, Charlie stood outside the church again, watching the sun disappear behind the chapel cross. Tommy approached, letter in hand. "You were with him, weren't you?" the boy asked. Charlie nodded. "Reed didn't vanish. He left town. I followed. Not to kill him, just to make sure he left for good." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because the town didn't want peace. It wanted a show. And I wasn't about to play the part they wrote for me." Tommy looked down. He said, "I should come to you if I wanted to know." Charlie took a breath. "What do you want to know, Tommy?" The boy looked up. Was he a bad man? Charlie didn't answer right away. He did bad things. He scared people, hurt them, controlled them. But I don't think he was born that way. Something broke in him long before you were born. Tommy's eyes glistened. "Did he love me?" Charlie knelt to his level. "He loved you enough to walk away. That's more than most men do." Tommy wiped his eyes. "I don't hate him. I just don't know what to do with all of it." Charlie nodded. "Then you're already ahead of the rest of this town." That night, Charlie returned to his room. The moonlight spilled through the window, casting shadows across the floor. He took out the leather notebook from his bag, the one that wasn't his, and opened it. Inside were sketches, notes, names, and one page torn from the back. It was the only page written in someone else's hand. "Charlie, if you're reading this, it means I didn't come back. I didn't want the boy growing up under my shadow. I know what I've done. You were right not to shoot me. You saved more than you know. Tell him what you want. But leave out the worst of me. Let him build a life from the better half." R.A. Charlie closed the notebook and sat in the dark. The next day, something strange happened. A group of older townsfolk, the ones who had been loudest 15 years ago, came to the church. They didn't speak to Charlie. They didn't apologize. But they sat quietly, one by one, until the pews were half full. Then Sheriff Morgan entered. He stepped up to the front, hat in hand, and turned to face them. "I've worn this badge for 30 years, he began, "and I've seen men lie to save their own skin, and men stay silent to protect others. And I'll tell you this, I'd rather stand beside a man who was called a coward than one who helped make him one." The crowd stirred. Sheriff Morgan continued. "Charlie Bell didn't run. He walked away so the rest of us didn't have to face who we really were, and I let that happen. I let him take the weight. So today, I take mine." He reached into his coat and placed the badge on the altar. Then he left. Outside, Charlie was saddling his horse. Tommy ran up. "You're leaving?" Charlie nodded. "My work here's done." "But they're finally listening." Charlie smiled. "That's not why I came back." "Then why?" Charlie placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "To let go of something I'd been carrying too long." Tommy hesitated. "Will I see you again?" Charlie stepped back, tightening the saddle. "You will. In every time you choose to tell the truth, when it'd be easier to stay quiet." Tommy looked down. Charlie mounted. "Tell your story," he said. "Tell his story too. But most of all, live yours better than both of us did." And with that, Charlie Bell rode out of Whistlewood. No applause, no parade, just the sound of hooves on dry ground, and a town, finally learning to carry its own silence. Whistlewood wasn't the same after Charlie Bell left, and not because he changed the town, but because the town saw itself for the first time in 15 years. Sheriff Ed Morgan's badge stayed on the church altar. No one picked it up. No one dared. For the first time in decades, Whistlewood had no sheriff. But it did have memory, and memory was finally louder than pride. Tommy Ash didn't speak much for a while. He kept to himself. Drew horses in the dirt, sat by the cemetery more than a boy his age should, But the whispers around him stopped. No more pointed fingers, no more pity, because everyone knew he carried something they couldn't. A story, a choice, and a name he'd now have to rebuild, piece by piece. One afternoon, Ruthie Gale found Tommy sitting alone by the old well, the same place where she once begged Charlie to stay silent. She handed him a small, wrapped bundle. "What's this?" he asked. "Something Charlie left behind. He said you'd know when to open it." Tommy unwrapped the cloth slowly. Inside was a journal, the one with R.A. carved into the cover. He opened to the first page. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was a story. Drawings, maps, descriptions of horses, saloons, rivers, men he'd met, lists of books he'd read, scrawled quotes, bits of poetry, and small, quiet entries. "I taught Tommy to ride today. He's fearless. Ruthie sang at dinner. I forgot how human I used to feel. Charlie warned me this town would eat me alive. I didn't listen. He was right. If I vanish, let them think what they want. But let Tommy know I tried." Tommy closed the book and pressed it to his chest. That evening, he walked into the saloon and stood in the same spot where his father once threatened men with a smile. He cleared his throat. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to talk." Chairs creaked, glasses lowered. "My name is Tommy Ash. You know who my father was, and you know what he did. But I didn't come here to defend him or to bury him. I came here to say this. You all let a good man walk away because it was easier than telling the truth." No one interrupted. And maybe you thought silence would keep you safe. But silence isn't safety. It's a slow death. And I don't want to grow up in a place where truth is the enemy. A long pause. Then someone clapped. Soft, unsure. Then another. Until the whole room stood. Not cheering, not shouting, but nodding. Because the boy had done what the town never could. He told the truth without a gun. That night, Ruthie sat by her window and watched the wind kick up dust along the ridge. She remembered the first time Charlie had walked into town. Young, sharp-eyed, proud. And she remembered the second time. Older, quiet, no pride left. "Just wait," she whispered. "You did it, Charlie." And somewhere out there, riding along the edges of prairie roads, he probably heard. A month later, a traveler passed through Whistlewood, asked if it was worth stopping in. The man at the livery said, "It's not much, but it's honest now." Asked who was in charge. They smiled and said, "No one." Then paused. Well, maybe the truth is. The traveler rode out, confused. But the wind knew, and the town, once built on fear and silence, now stood tall on something better. Not vengeance, not pride, just the simple weight of a story told right. And as for Charlie Bell, some say he kept riding until he found a town that hadn't made up its mind yet. Some say he became a preacher in a village by the river. Others swear they saw him teaching a boy how to throw a lasso on a ranch too small to be noticed on any map. But the truth didn't care where he went, because he'd already left it behind. And that was enough.